All right, we ready to go? Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thanks for indulging our lunch break and getting back, and appreciate the good work of the Chairman Olson this morning. And now we're still on the morning schedule, but we're moving forward with the telecommunications piece of it. So uh, uh, Commissioner Petrie, welcome. Talk to us about telecommunications.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Petrie, Public Service Commission. As many of you may know, the Telecommunications Act was recently extended in the sense that the sunset was extended for an additional 2 years so that it now is scheduled to sunset in 2025. And so what I'd like to do is just give you a brief overview, kind of a cataloging of the functions that the Wyoming Public Service Commission currently performs in the telecommunications realm. It's quite a bit different than the regulation of the other utilities. I'd say that it used to be somewhat similar. As you heard Senator Case comment earlier, there were some exciting times in the telecommunications world a few years ago, perhaps not unlike what we see going on in other utility sectors now. And that was around that time that Wyoming adopted its Telecommunications Act. That's the act was passed in 1995, right before the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996 was passed. And telecommunications, if you can think back, looked quite a bit different then. And I think expectations for how it was all going to play out were quite a bit different than what we actually saw play out. Now, of course, the space is fairly dominated by wireless communications, certainly at least compared to the way it was. So the functions that the Public Service Commission performs are not related to cellular or wireless telecommunications. What we're talking about here is wireline telecommunications for the most part, and often we'll be referring to essential local services or essential local exchange service, which is basically the traditional telecommunication service that you would have gotten at your house on a landline, and including access to the long distance network. So what the Wyoming Public Service Commission does as of now is, one, we administer the Wyoming Universal Service Fund. The Wyoming Universal Service Fund is a mechanism that's meant to assist customers in the state that would otherwise face relatively high prices or rates for essential service. And so this is a subsidy or support program where we collect money from telecommunications customers, including wireless and others. And that money is used to support the rates or to reduce the rates of customers in certain parts of the state that are still served by non-competitive local exchange service providers. So that's about a $2.1 million a year program, and the benefits end up going to about 23,000 customers. So it's, roughly $90 per customer. Secondly, the commission has still the responsibility to receive and process applications for certificates of public convenience and necessity. This is a pretty limited activity anymore. We have not denied any certificates that I can think of. I know that some of them have been delayed while the commission staff or the commission made some additional inquiries of the applicant to make sure that they were a capable company that had the managerial and financial and technical capabilities to do what they claimed they wanted to do in the state. And so this function may deter some bad actors or companies that aren't really of much or any substance from approaching the state to try to do business here. A lot of them never end up actually providing service in the state, but they are apparently seeking to get themselves certified and legal to do business everywhere. So as their business develops, they'll be ready for that. Some of them work out and some of them don't. We have an outage reporting system where utilities, including the telecoms, are required to contact the commission when substantial outages occur. So when they have a serious service interruption, we get a report. We maintain a 24/7 telephone number that'll be answered. This actually is something that applies to all utilities, but telecoms call. That information then gets passed on by the commission on an as needed basis to the Office of Homeland Security, the governor's office, and anybody else that the situation seems to call for in our judgment. And through the reports to Homeland Security, that then gets filtered down to or gets disseminated out to local emergency services personnel so that everybody's aware if there's a communication outage or any other utility outage in their area, then the local first responders and at the state level, everybody is aware of that situation in case it's important for their work. We also receive and process customer complaints. And I think it was mentioned earlier, there's basically two types of complaints in front of the commission. There are informal complaints that our complaints staff attempts to resolve through something you could call a mediation process. It's not really a mediation process, but it's something similar. And then there's also the possibility of formal complaints that result in a contested case proceeding if the customer can't get satisfaction. We conduct two types of activities that are related to federal universal service fund support, which is a significant federal support mechanism that amounts to many millions of dollars. In 2022, it was $40 million in Wyoming, and I believe that's all the high cost support. So same kind of concern that's behind the Wyoming Universal Service Fund. The Federal Universal Service Fund has a few components that are still related to high cost telecom, and they also have transitioned into more of a broadband support mechanism. But what the commission itself does is we accept applications and determine whether a telecommunications company meets all the requirements to be designated as an eligible telecommunications carrier so that they can get in line for whatever their an appropriate share of federal support might be. And then annually, all the companies who have met that designation hurdle and then have proceeded to get the money, they go through a certification process, which is where they report to the commission what they have done and in the way that they have expended those funds, and then the commission certifies whether or not that all is in order. And so that is a delegation of federal authority. There's a provision in the Telecom Act that tells the commission you can go ahead and do those things that the federal government delegates down to the states. And so we perform those functions. We also have the authority to entertain rate increase applications from non-competitive local exchange companies. And those are rare. There's been one in the last decade that I can think of, and it probably goes further than that with a very low count. The companies can lower their rates without getting any approval. That's considered, I guess, an aspect of a more competitive environment. They don't need to get approval to raise their rates, only to increase them. And as I said, that's only happened once in the last many years. We also approve or consider and approve interconnection agreements and amendments thereto. Those are the contracts that are made between telecommunications companies. They have a lot of interrelationships where they're using each other's facilities and services in order to provide the service that they provide on a retail basis. So to the extent that they have these kind of agreements, those are filed with the commission for approval as well as amendments. And part of the idea there is that allows other actors in the industry to be aware of what's going on with their competitors, so that there's not any kind of conspiring between wholesale, in their wholesale dealings to give advantages to one company over the other. And that is a quick overview of what the commission does in actual telecom regulation now. There's several other things that I just want to mention briefly that are telecom related, but not really telecom regulation. One is we see to it that the surcharge for it's the Committee on Telecommunications Services for the Communications Impaired, and they operate the 711 access system, so that people that have that type of disability can receive those services and be able to use the telephone systems to communicate. That committee gives the commission a number and describes their budget and the requirements for funding, and then the commission directs telecommunications companies to remit those funds, and that's how that system is funded. We also are charged with conducting a 911 emergency tax rate analysis and turning in a report to the legislature. This has to do with trying to monitor the equity between regular subscription telecommunication services and prepaid wireless services. A few years ago, it came to attention that 911 surcharges or 911 taxes were not being paid by users of prepaid wireless service. And so even though certainly cell phones are a big source of 911 calls, and their users are, and many people have nothing but cell phones, there was a disparity in those two types, the subscription versus the prepaid. And so that's a study that's performed by our staff and in conjunction with the Department of Revenue. And I think there's one of those reports in a draft form that you'll be getting soon. Another thing about telecommunications is that they pay into the utility assessment. And as Senator Case mentioned a little bit ago, there was an increase where we ended up with the creation of a two-tiered system where certain utilities pay up to 3 mils, and then other utilities are in a different tier or category, and they could pay up to 5 mils on gross intrastate revenues to fund the operation of the Public Service Commission. The telecommunications companies pay into that, and they represent about 6% or $240,000 in a recent year of the total collections that the commission receives under the utility assessment to fund the commission. A final thing, actually I have one more after the final thing, almost final thing, the North American Numbering Plan Administration. This is not a terribly active role of the commission. Telephone numbers get managed by the North American Numbering Plan Administrator, and they hand out to telecommunications companies 1,000 blocks or 10,000 blocks or some block of numbers that they need to run their business. And so we get a notification, at least in certain circumstances, that such a request has been made. And then we do look into it and try to make sure that these are companies that are having some connection to Wyoming, that are registered in Wyoming. We've actually complained a few times, not to much success. But the worry is that we don't think anybody is really interested in becoming a multi-area code state unless we have to. So if we were to become a multi-area code state for some good reason, like more people and more telephones, that'd be one thing. But if they're being used for call center operations in the Bahamas or something, then we really wouldn't want to lose our 307 numbering system. At least that's my impression. There also may be a mention, this is the last thing, There may be a mention of the Telecommunications Act or Certificates of Public Convenience and Necessity for Telecommunications Act or telecommunications companies in connection with the eminent domain statutes. So I guess the point of those last few items that aren't really regulation, but are something to think about as we go into the next 2 years, discussing what we're going to do with the Telecommunications Act, whether it sunsets, whether some of it's saved, whether we go in different direction. There are some ties between the commission that exist in the Telecommunications Act and that are more remotely connected to the commission's activities with telecommunications companies in the statutes. And we'll have to be careful that we don't overlook any of those, whether it's a sunset, a redo, or however it's ultimately handled. That's all I have to say, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to answer any questions.
Mr. Petrie, and thanks for sticking around. Appreciate that. In a part of my life, one time I got to draft the telecom numbering plan for the country of Bolivia. And also the frequencies plan. That was high points in my day. That's pretty fun. Questions for Mr. Petrie? Questions, Senator Scott?
Powers depended on landline service to reach the rest of the system. Is that still true to any degree? That's the first question I've got, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Petrie, Commissioner Petrie.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, my understanding is that is still very common, and that the object in the wireless business is to get your information to ground and get it on fiber or some kind of hardline facilities at the earliest opportunity.
Not necessarily facilities supplied by a telephone company anymore, but absolutely.
Right.
Back to you, Senator Scott.
Obvious follow on to that is there some need to regulate to make sure that where it does depend on a landline company, that it's available. So that's follow on. Second very simple question. Am I right in understanding the sunset is such, if we want to continue it, a bill at the next general session is what's needed? Is that right?
That's correct, Mr. Senator Scott. Mr. Commissioner Petrie. Anybody else? Questions for Commissioner Petrie? Commissioner, would you mind going over the numbers on the Universal Service Fund one more time? How many customers we support? I believe you suggested that they're supported to the tune of $90. I think that's a monthly figure. And the total size of the fund was being something under $3 million, if I remember right. Can you correct me on that?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. My understanding is that it's roughly 23,000 customers. I think it's slightly over 23,000 customers the last time I looked. Then those were amongst nine telecommunications companies. So the 23,000 customers are the customers of 9 different telecom companies. And the program is 2.1 million per year.
And Mr. Petrie, Commissioner Petrie, where are those customers located in Wyoming? What type of areas? Are they predominantly rural, predominantly smaller communities, big cities? Where are they?
Those are, I believe, not going to be found in Casper, Cheyenne, Laramie, Lander, Riverton. It may be the customers in the outskirts of the entire rest of the state. And it's the territories of those 9 companies, and there's several up in the Bighorn Basin area. There's Union, which is
excellent. So, Commissioner Petrie, I mean, we all agree that this is a subsidy. We might disagree about other rate things of being subsidies, but this is explicitly a subsidy in the law where money is collected from some customers, perhaps all customers, to give to some customers, and they get, if you said a benefit of $90, I think roughly $90, I assume a month. what do they pay for their telephone service? And committee members might be able to compare that with what they pay in their own community. So just for example, I pay $100 or I get service as part of the internet package, though, just throwing that out there, you know, probably ballpark to you. Do you know what these customers pay and what do they get?
Well, Mr. Chairman, the statutory average cost figure that we use in the calculation of the support that gets sent out to the companies for the benefit of their customers is $30.
$30.
But that is just for the essential local exchange service. So in the cases where it's packaged up with any other services, then it has to be split out into, so that you can see what the average cost around the state of basic essential services. And so it's the company's rates, many of them remain those rates that were set under the TS Lyric approach many years ago. And that was not a process that actually tried to determine what the cost of the service that was being provided was. It was more of a forward-looking determination of what the price would be to provide the service, a total long-run incremental cost. And so those rates in a lot of cases were sufficiently high that they have not been updated generally. And so some of those rates remain high, and some of those companies, probably, I guess all of those companies, receive federal universal service fund support, which is then taken into account before we make calculations about how much support a company would
Let me
need.
interrupt you. For at least our monitor is about to go to sleep. The big monitor, I don't know if that affects the Zoom participants, but it says TV will turn off automatically. Maybe that's just something local. Sorry, little housekeeping. We got to finish this meeting in 34 seconds.
So we take the receipt of that federal support into account before we apply the Wyoming Universal Service Fund support and calculate the amount that's actually going to be given out. But of course, this is an explicit, deliberate subsidy that was created to look out for people in the state that would otherwise experience relatively high rates for non-competitive service.
Commissioner Petrie, thank you so much. So just kind of in perspective, we're roughly spending $90 a month for these customers, 23,000 of them. We're spending $90. So we collect $90 to support their rates so that they can pay $30. When most of us are paying more than that, but they're only getting voice service, traditional service, but it might be part of another package, or they might have a cell phone that they're getting their internet on. But this system is rooted in 30 years ago. So this is why we keep coming back to this sunset on this bill is, are we kind of doing the right thing here? And we've always sunset the bill, indicating there's some kind of transition, but we've never sunset this. We've never transitioned this subsidy structure to get us to a different place into the future. And I'm all happy for having a bill that helps us to do that over a period of time. But we have a bill that it's frozen us in time to a time when a lot of people in this room weren't perhaps not even born yet. So maybe not, but at least a couple of them. So Commissioner Petrie.
Mr. Chairman, I just checked my math and I don't know if I misspoke or not, but
I probably
think that
misinterpreted.
23,000 times 90 is about 2.1 million. So it's an annual.
Yeah, it's an annual number,
Yeah,
not a monthly number.
right. The customers, the benefit.
Very
to
good,
Those
very good.
23,000 customers is $90 on an annual basis.
So, and Commissioner Petrie, I'm so glad you did that because that kind of puts it even more in perspective because we're actually. If you had people out there that are paying $30 a month now. Okay, $3,600 a year. And we give them another $90 a year on top of their money. That's not really much of subsidy in the whole perspective. We really think about it in terms of their total package. So why are we doing this? So anyway, but we ought to think about that. Commissioner, anything from you and then go around the room. Senator Landon.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just a comment and really not a question, I don't think at this point. This is kind of a lift. And I've actually chaired the committee for a couple of years and carried a bill or two. But boy, you try to get arms all the way around this and for me, it's a lift and it's just not coming very clear today. So I've got work to do. I just, it makes sense to me that we're looking at this whole issue because this subsidy in this day and age sure doesn't play like the way it did 30 or 40 years ago. I wonder how badly needed this is for all those people out across when there's wireless service and dishes off of every house and trailer, So thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad we're taking it up.
Former Mr. Chairman, everybody on this committee is the chairman. Senator Scott, former chairman of the Corporations Committee.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things I'd like to see would be a strengthening of the commission's ability to deal with service complaints. And frankly, I live in an area where the cell service has been gradually improving, but is still spotty, especially when the weather's bad. And why that is, I don't understand, but it is. And also we have areas where there is no cell service or any other telephone service and hasn't been since the feds took everybody digital. I had an experience this year where the landline was out for over a week and found that the cell service provider, the landline service provider in our rural Natrona County, their repair service is almost inaccessible. They were a couple of minutes wait time away from my having to call the Public Service Commission to get through to them. Before they finally came through and explained what the heck was going on. And Mr. Chairman, it is a real problem when they go out. The cell service is good most of the time, but so I think there are some issues there, and we need to find some more teeth to the service and reliability issues.
Commissioner, did you want to address anything with respect to your service reliability authority with respect to complaints?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I didn't make this explicitly clear when I mentioned complaints a minute ago, but our full service quality enforcement powers apply to the non-competitive local exchange carriers. Many of you will remember that CenturyLink was determined to be subject to effective competition pursuant to a stipulation that I won't be able to remember all the parties, but I believe it was the Office of Consumer Advocate, the company, and maybe AARP and maybe Farm Bureau, but I'm not sure about those last two. I'd have to look. But anyway, that involved a temporary subsidization by the company of of a satellite internet service that was capable of serving as a voice service, and that was determined that they were subject to competition. And so that reduces our actual authority over that large company, which is the provider in Senator Scott's neighborhood, to require any particular level of performance with respect to that. And now what we do is we contact that company, and then the same thing that we would do with a cell phone company or anybody else that we don't have actual authority over for service quality purposes. And we attempt to get the arrangements made to get repairs done. We've had, we have other incidents like that where there are complaints, either individual customers who are having a difficult time. And we've also had things like the local rural electric co-op having a problem and facing a week or thereabouts before they can expect to see a service technician. And so when we have the chance, we try to expedite those things just by being an information conduit.
It's moral suasion.
Moral
not
suasion.
Not
is
really
correct, Mr. Chairman.
teeth in the law. Thank you. Anybody else on the committee? Thank you so much, Commissioner. Let's have other folks that want to address. Can we do providers now of all different types? Can you kind of come up, and if you don't mind, if you're not mad at each other, you could, unless the PSC had anything else.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Mr.
Hold on one
Chairman?
second.
Mr. Chairman, there's just one other thing that I wanted to mention, and
Okay.
and I guess it might be helpful. My understanding is that we're going to embark on an effort that will extend for perhaps all year and maybe longer into the next year or the next interim. And I've heard that the representatives of the industry players in telecommunications sector plan to get together and try to devise a plan for bringing the Wyoming Telecommunications Act up to the moment.
Great. Well, you've staked a high bar. Let's let's hear from them. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Commissioner. Folks in the industry that would like to, just to save time, to sit next to each other at the tables, and we'll just work down the list. No particular order, no particular, unless you have an order you want to do. Had any of you decided to go first or anything? The mic went to Ms. Levin, so we will go there. Ms.
Yes, I
Levin,
got-
welcome.
I got designated, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jody Levin. I'm here on behalf of Verizon and Charter. Of course, my clients requested this interim topic and requested that it be a 2-year study so that this first year could be largely educational. It's been about 10 years since we've had major legislation on the telecom front. So, we felt that it was important for the legislature to understand what is in the act before you choose to sunset it. My clients believe that there's a difference between a need for the act and need for regulation. So much of the act does need to be modernized and brought up to today's kind of economic situation, certainly a competitive industry, but there are elements of the act that my clients continue to believe are important. They have resolved disputes over the years. That's probably why you haven't seen a lot of issues over the last 10 years, because your predecessors or some of you currently addressed those things, whether it was issues between the carriers themselves or issues between the carriers and the commission. There are elements of the act that address all of those aspects and remain relevant in the opinion of my clients. I will say Commissioner Petrie is correct. Industry, has begun some conversations. We intend to do that throughout this interim so that we can try to resolve some of those issues before we request legislation next interim.
Thank you, Ms. Levin. Any questions specifically for Ms. Levin? Mr. Pickard, please.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dave Pickard. I represent Lumen, formerly known as CenturyLink. And as you can all tell, Ms. Levin does an eloquent job of encapsulating what the industry position is as far as this interim is concerned. What you have in front of you, and I think everybody received it via email over the weekend, is a very quick history of the legislative actions taken by the legislature, starting in 1995 with the Telecommunications Act, which was a precursor to the Federal Act, as a matter of fact, and it was through your leadership, Senator Case and Chairman Scott, that the state of Wyoming was on the leading edge of that. So what we did as a group, and there are a few others that are in the audience and then others that are listed on that document. We all came together about 3 weeks ago. We looked at the list that is in front of you. We had some additional comments by industry members, kind of fleshing out exactly what each one of those pieces of legislation did. We have all had a chance to review it. We all agree that substantively what is in this document is the reality of the industry right, or as the legislative approaches have occurred. We're all willing, and we are going to continue to work together over this interim and then ask again next interim to bring our work products forward as you as policymakers can take a look at what do you think is best for the state of Wyoming and the constituents. And I think, you know, based on some of the conversation that you had in the electrical utilities this morning, and as Commissioner Petrie indicated, the telecom industry is much different today than it was yesterday. It's much different, substantially different than the 1995 Act, and even substantially different as far as the players and the competitors since the last substantive changes in 2013 and 2015. So we think Wyoming needs to move forward. Agree with Ms. Levin that there are aspects of the act that other colleagues in the industry feel necessary to maintain in the green books, and we'll go along with the industry as Lumen. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or I'll pass the mic down the table.
Let's find out. Any questions for Mr. Pickard? Mr. Pickard, before you lose the mic. So have you ever been to the headquarters building for Lumen down in Denver? Are they still at 1425 14th Street?
Mr. Chairman, I have not been.
There you
but I
go.
do believe that they're still located there.
Okay, so I used to work in that
Yeah.
building. I'm following a page from Bill Winnie. Have you guys noticed? I used to work in that building. And I went there and went in the lobby, and they still have these tremendously beautiful murals as you go in. They have 2 phone booths, manhole covers from the old Mountain States Telephone Company, and they have these beautiful murals of Alan Tupper True, who's the same person who, of course, designed the license plate for Lester Hunt, and also but did the murals in our chambers. Each of the 4 murals in both chambers. And they're spectacular, of the building of the telecom industry, of people climbing poles and all this. They're just, it's fabulous. You need to go there just to see those.
Mr. Chairman, and I know we're short on time, but I will add this. What you see in the telecom industry, the faces of the representatives in the lobby, we've all changed hats.
Like musical
times.
chairs, except
You
for
know,
Brian Woody, he has it.
That
and
is
Jason
true,
has it.
and Jason, but Ms. Levin and I, she represents Verizon now. I used to represent Verizon. I used to represent AT&T. Ms. Lance represents them now. And the interesting thing about art and the telecommunications industry, prior to 1984, the monopoly was AT&T.
Yeah.
And they commissioned an enormous amount of artwork to go in all of their central offices around the country. And you'll remember Stephanie Tyler Jackson
Very well.
with AT&T. She and I think after the divestiture and somewhere in early 2010 or so, we had the ability to provide as a grant a lot of that excess art throughout the country to institutions, public institutions, including governments and higher education. So all of that artwork from AT&T era has all been distributed to other nonprofits, or to nonprofits, not other nonprofits. So
Wow.
with
Thank
that,
you
Mr.
very.
Chairman, I'll turn it over to Jason.
Okay, and Jason Hendricks also was at the Illinois Commerce Commission. little much later than I was there, but Jason, welcome. Very much good to see you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jason Hendricks with Range. Range is a DBA of four separate legal entities, three of which are rural local exchange carriers, one of which is a competitor. Those three receive universal service funds, one does not. And yes, I did start off at the Illinois Commerce Commission right after the 96 Act passed, and so heavily involved in the telecommunications deregulation. So going forward, yeah, looking forward to working with my colleagues, industry colleagues on seeing what we can do to come to an agreement on various things and updating the act to the extent that we can. The big name of the game is competition. That's what the act is about. It's about opening up the industry to competition. And at the time, there was a recognition that there would still be these high cost areas that may not be served by competitors. And so that's how that USF mechanism was initiated. So where are we now? Is competition everywhere? That's one of the things that we need to look at. And there are changes coming down the pike federally with the Federal Communications Commission. We're expecting maybe a change in Federal Universal Service Program or an update to it within the next couple of months. There are BEAD grants. I'm sorry, BEAD is an acronym. It's a broadband program. It's going to help expand networks throughout the state of Wyoming. And to the extent that happens, then maybe some of these issues that we're talking about for service reliability and service in general can be addressed through that. So a lot of things to look at over the next year. And at the end of the day, then we'll see where we are and what's still needed. So appreciate the time.
Thank you. Senator Scott.
In Natrona County. Am I right in thinking that none of the carriers that receive Wyoming State Universal Funds do any business in Natrona County? Is that correct? And then, Mr. Chairman, I have a follow-up question.
Jason, if you can. Mr. Hendricks.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, we actually serve a small portion in Natrona County. I believe Midwest is in Natrona County, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we serve Midwest. And so we do serve a portion of that. As far as most of the county, yeah, it's not served by rural carriers and therefore not receiving universal service fund because the large carrier's been classified as competitive and therefore not eligible for the funds.
And
Go ahead, Senator Scott.
I will say Midwest is a very isolated community with a large percentage of, frankly, just plain people that are economically poor. And so this may be quite important to their getting service. And realize that little feature. Am I right in thinking that at this point, the major role for the state universal service fund is really as a backup to the federal one in case they do something that makes their fund unusable?
Mr. Hendricks.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I would consider it to be a complement to the federal fund. So the federal fund covers a portion of the costs that aren't otherwise recovered. The state covers a portion, and then theoretically, a company is whole from their cost recovery perspective. And that's what the Federal Telecommunications Act envisioned, is that a state would be a partner in helping to achieve universal service.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
When you go back to the old Ma Bell days when there was AT&T was a monopoly,
Work for them.
their plan essentially was they wanted universal telephone service and were raising the business rates to provide the funds so that they did have affordable service for all the residential customers, including those in places that are expensive to serve. And the risk, I think, Mr. Chairman, in doing away with the universal service funds is that you cease to have universal service in parts of particularly some of our rural areas and places like Midwest that are small and a little hard to get to and can't afford things, will simply no longer have telephone service. And Mr. Chairman, I think that is a bit of a risk.
Thank you very much, Senator Scott. We'll have lots of time to talk about that. And actually how the fund is used down the road, whether it's going to be used for more services, but as it stands here right now, I have a hard time thinking that a $7 a month subsidy to keep people at phone bills that are far below any others in the country. Maybe we need to think about that. Mr. Hendricks, please comment on that.
Mr. Chairman, I think that we still do have some of the highest local service rates in the country. Now, local service is local service, and depending on your area, it can be a very small service area. No long distance, no broadband, nothing else. And so we do have some of the higher rates in the country for what it's worth.
Can't wait to drill down on all that. Any other questions for Mr. Hendricks? Thank you. And then we go to the Woody family, who are telecom pioneers in Wyoming and literally built landlines, networks out of barbed wire fences and had switches in their living room of the family home. I mean, this is a true success story. So I hope I've set you up, Brian, as you know about Union Telephone more from maybe the wireless aspect around the state, but this is a tried and true, long time, hard fought, built Wyoming company. And you ought to be very proud of that. Brian Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Don't screw this up.
I'll try not to. I'm Brian Woody. I'm the Chief Customer Relations Officer for Union. See, just a little about us. These guys talk great stuff about the Telecom Act itself. I really can't add much to theirs. Union started out by my great-grandfather, 1914. We were incorporated. So almost 110 years next year we will be. And Senator Case is correct. A lot of the first lines were on barbed wire. It was easier to pull the barbed wire off and put an insulator between it posts than put a pole in the ground and run the lines. Our first switch was created from 30-30 and 30-40 rifle casings because the switch was on back order for 2 years. We've built up a lot and we do cover wireless today. We cover the entire state of Wyoming with wireless mobile service. That service is in the process of being upgraded. And I think that this act helps us continue to serve those hard to reach places in Wyoming. Many of them that, even going for grant funding today, you have to exclude some of those customers because they're just too far out. You can't make the grant dollars work out and justify it. So that is Wyoming. There are a lot of those customers that they're just off the beaten track too far, and they deserve that the services from voice to broadband probably more than the people here in the cities because they are that far out. And so, I'd just like to leave it at that. Any questions?
Thank you. There's a delay. Thank you very much, Mr. Woody. Any questions from Mr. Woody? Thank you very much. So you guys are going to be part of the team and we'll probably get some public comments and things that are going to be thinking about this and coming back with recommendations. I think committee, if we were to think about it, that there are ongoing responsibilities delegated to states by the federal government or that we could take advantage, that we need to be in that space. We can't just let the act go away. We'll have to have a discussion down the road about how this subsidy mechanism fits in, whether it expands from voice services or whether it goes away and we do something else with the broadband world. But they're going to work on that and anybody could participate if they want. I would assume you'd welcome their participation. And then we probably will have other commenters and there are people that we haven't heard from with this for that we need to include. So thank you all. Thank you all very much. All right. Katie, do we have anybody online or anybody else in the audience that wishes to address the committee on this? Anybody else in the audience? Not seeing anything on the audience? Anything online? Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, if I could, what is the chairman's view on this? Is this, we expect them to come back in the next interim at our first meeting and have a proposal, or are we expecting something in this current interim? It seems like we're going into a budget session, spending a lot of time on something we're not going to probably take up to a general session. I just want to know if there's any sense from the chairman about how they want to proceed. So I can allocate my own time to start looking at the Telecom Act now, or it's next interim. Thank you.
That's a very good question, Senator Barlow and committee, and my co-chairman and I haven't totally discussed this, but there is no necessary urgency until next year. Next year is also going into a budget year, and trying to do something with an act might not be wise. At least we do have the next general act. We set the sunset date to that. There may be other reasons for, and I'll throw this on the table. There may be a possibility based on things that happen at the federal level that we would need to tweak the act now to account for, to allow Wyoming to participate or do something in reaction to federal activities right now. That's a possibility. We could have a small tweak in any particular area and then deal with the rest of the sunset and the subsidy mechanisms next year. So I'll just throw that out, but why don't we wait to hear from our working group that's been established, and any members, of course, are welcome, and any other members of the legislature that would have an interest would be welcome to work with them. Good enough? And nobody online, Katie? Oh, this is so great, because we get to go to my next exciting topic, which is the Department of Insurance. So did you guys come up? Where's your fearless leader? He's not here. Well, we're glad to have you, and we don't have a clue what you're going to say. So you have to introduce yourself and tell us what you're going to tell us. Thank you very much to the commission, members of industry, electric and telecom. Drive safely, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Okay,
Welcome, Department of Insurance.
thank you. Thank you for having us. My name is Tana Howard, and I am the Deputy Commissioner of Insurance. With me today is Brian Stevens. He is the Market Conduct and Consumer Advocate Manager at the department. And yes, Commissioner Rude gives his apologies for not being able to attend this meeting. We had a scheduling conflict.
I think this is the first one he's ever missed.
Yeah,
I'm
he's,
sure he doesn't feel too good about it.
no, he's weeping, all the way up to Sheridan for a separate meeting. So yeah, you'll have to deal with us today. So thank you for having us. And we're going to tell you about what we do in the Department of Insurance. So the Department of Insurance, obviously, we regulate the business of insurance from top to bottom. So the insurance companies themselves, we license them to the individuals who sell the insurance, as well as taking all of the different complaints. So we have a lot of different sections of the department, and I was just kind of going to go through a few of these. And feel free to stop me with any questions. So the Department of Insurance, one of the first sections that we have is the licensing section. And the licensing section of the department licenses producers, so your agents, everybody has an insurance agent, your adjuster who comes and adjusts your claims, the agency firms themselves, third-party administrators, even from a limited lines license for, our farmers who purchase crop insurance. And surprisingly enough, all of these different licensing sections, as of last week, this has probably grown, but our section, we have about over 209,000 licenses that we manage, and we manually touch almost probably about 85% of those licenses. So, and this is a staff of 3. So we're, again, I'll probably say this throughout several times. We are the smallest insurance department in the country. And we do a lot of work. We're small but mighty. That's what we like to say. So of those 209,000, only 3,100 are resident licenses. So those are your local agents and adjusters and agencies. So we're not going without, in case anybody was wondering, with any insurance agents or adjusters in our state with that 209,000. Our next section of the department is the exam section, and that's our financial section. They're responsible for maintaining the financial solvency of our insurance companies. So they monitor we have 4 domestic companies, which means we're kind of like their mothers with our domestic companies. We're responsible for making sure they stay in line and stay financially solvent. And we're kind of like their mother. That's what I like to say. We have 1 health insurance company in our state, 1 dental insurance company in our state, and 2 property and casualty insurance companies. These, I'm sure corporations, for many of you have heard these bills that will come across occasionally. They're the famous insurance department accreditation bills. They're long, they're dry. It's usually your nap time. It's really hard. But these are things, the exam section is where the accreditation really matters. So the insurance department is accredited by the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. And that is a national organization that of all the states insurance commissioners get together and they follow insurance topics, they create model law. And the purpose of the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, or NEIC, as we call it, is to maintain state insurance regulation. So to keep it in our hands and keep it out of the federal government's hands. So Chairman Case has been lucky enough and a few others to attend with us with these national meetings where we talk insurance for 5 days straight. But these accreditation bills within the exam section, the accreditation process is we get basically a golden award, basically saying, you've followed all the steps and you have reviewed these insurance companies' financials to a gold standard. And all of the other states will accept that exam. So if we have an insurance company, yes, it's great for us as an insurance department to have our golden award and as an accredited insurance department, but it's really great for our insurers. The insurers are the ones who benefit from that. That means that if they wanted to expand their business and go to another state, they can, and that state would accept the financial exam that our examiners have done. So it's like a golden ticket saying, okay, yep, you can do business in this state because you've been checked out in your home state and your home state is an accredited insurance company. So that will probably come here. These accreditation bills, I think we have one next year. So you're off the hook this year, thankfully, but we will have more. And the other portion of of our exam or financial section is premium tax collection. So every insurance policy that is sold within the state of Wyoming has a premium. We all pay it. And these insurance companies are taxed on that premium. So every year they tally up their premium totals and then they are paid, we charge them a certain percentage of tax. And that ends up to be about last year for 2022, about $39 million that goes into the general fund. This kind of goes sporadic throughout the general fund. And one of the pieces that it funds is the volunteer fireman pension fund, which we had a bill last year. All of the fire premiums and percentage goes to that fund. So it's good money, but put in a good place.
If you don't mind me interrupting for just a second. So $39 million going to the general fund. We heard from the Secretary of State's office the other day about the corporate business, which is very, very good business in Wyoming, generates $36 million for the general fund. So these guys are the sleepers. They're like doing more with even a smaller agency. So please keep going.
Yes. And that 39 million is just for the premium tax. We actually have all of the agents throughout the licensing section have to be appointed with insurance companies. And what that means is they have a contract with an insurance company and it signifies their relationship saying, I can sell insurance for you and I'm going to follow your rules, right? Your rules of conduct or whatnot. We charge then at $15 an appointment just for companies to signify saying, okay, yep, we're reappointing these individuals. And that generates another approximately $4 million for the general fund as well. And then moving on, we also have a different tax for insurance companies who are not licensed in our state. And those insurance companies, that line of business is called surplus lines or non-admitted insurance. And non-admitted insurance it's rare. It's for your specialty risks, somewhere, something that isn't going to find insurance in the normal admitted licensed market. And these risks generate, they just like a regular admitted policy, they have to pay a tax. And this generates another $3.4 million for these surplus lines policies, and we maintain those. So the next policy, or the next section, excuse me, is the policy section of our department. So everybody has an insurance policy and we get them and they're big and probably nobody reads them. That's generally our rule of thumb, or what we find. We read them though. Wyoming is one of the few prior approval states. So what that means is your insurance company cannot send you a form or any policy form to you or to any of your constituents without it being approved by the insurance department. And this goes for every type of insurance. So life insurance, property insurance, casualty insurance, health insurance, any type of policy document you receive, they have to file it with the department, and our policy section reviews that, make sure that it is in compliance with the Wyoming statutes and that there's nothing that's harmful to Wyoming consumers. So that is a staff of 5, and they do very well for that. We receive about, in life and health form filings, we received just under 2,000 last year, and another 1,800 for property and casualty filings. Now, when I say filings, that just means that these are think of it as one email, basically, one file that was sent, and it could have hundreds, if not thousands of policy forms within inside of that. So it can be a long and cumbersome policy or process to review some of these policies occasionally. So they work hard. Another piece of that policy section is near and dear to my heart. We maintain at the department a federal grant. It's the State Health Insurance Program. It's a federal grant that we have received for about 30 years. And what it is federal dollars that go towards counseling Medicare beneficiaries. Insurance is complicated, and somehow Medicare and Medicare supplement is even more complicated. And the purpose of this grant is just to provide unbiased free counseling to all of our Medicare beneficiaries within the state. So we subcontract that grant out, and currently it's with just our neighbors over in Riverton. Wyoming Senior Citizens maintains that, and we have 42 volunteers throughout the state. So you can call the Riverton office or our department, and they will set you up with a local volunteer to talk about your Medicare supplement policies if you need any advice or anything like that. In conjunction with that grant, the department also creates every year a Medicare supplement buyer's guide where we update all of the Medicare information and rates as well. So you know what the average price is and the changes that are coming for the next year for Medicare. It's a good grant and it's a good program that we, the department, feel like we really help our Wyoming residents out with. Another consumer helping section of our department is the Consumer Complaints Division. So nobody really likes insurance, right? And we can all probably occasionally talk bad about our insurance companies, but we, and sometimes not, sometimes we praise them. But this Consumer Complaints Division is a staff of 4, 2 real consumer advocates and 1 investigator and a manager. And they take the complaints. So if anybody has an issue with their insurance company, we have a formal complaint process where you can file a complaint online or you can file a paper complaint, and we will investigate your complaint with your insurance. Any type of insurance you can file a complaint on. Obviously, when we investigate them, we cannot do anything to those insurance companies unless they have violated the law. Generally, most of these are resolved just by us talking to them. And going back and forth, but we get about just under 400 complaints a year, and that does not count any of the phone calls or just the questions that we get about insurance and general inquiries. But we got about 160 complaints. Let's see, we had 140 were related to health insurance and another 120 related to auto insurance and just over 60 for home insurance last year in 2022. the things that we do with these complaints, we obviously investigate to make sure that the insurance company and the adjusters are completing a full investigation and claim file when you file a complaint on your home policy or you get in an accident, with your automobile. We're making sure that these complaint files are complete and they're doing their due diligence. We're making sure that the policies are filed when they have these, so we're kind of double checking. But these are things that we do, making sure that consumers get paid, there's no delay in the claims handling process, no misrepresentation or misappropriation. It definitely takes up our day and we pride ourselves. We get a lot of compliments from different consumers and we feel like we really help people with this consumer complaints division. Some of the things we can't do, I wish we could solve everybody's problems. I wish we could make insurance companies pay. We cannot do that. We can't act as your legal representation. We definitely, once a attorney is involved, we step aside. We can't recommend an insurance company or an agent. We have 209,000 licensed, agents and adjusters. I understand it's really hard to pick one, but we can't recommend one for you. We can't decide who's at fault in an accident, and we can't decide the amount of the loss or how much the insurance company should pay. Another one that is maybe one of the most frequent inquiries in our department is rates. Everybody's rates go up. Wyoming is a competitive market. We do have statutes within our code for if the market becomes non-competitive, but most types of insurance we consider competitive. We have a lot of insurers licensed in our state, over 1,100. And so we do not regulate or dictate the rates within insurance. There are a few that we do. Long-term care insurance, we do regulate the rates. Medicare supplement also needs commissioner approval. So there are a few that we do, but most of those, when you're calling about your home, auto, we do not regulate those rates. They have to be competitive and they can't be, there are laws that insurance companies, of course, cannot charge just whatever they want. They have to justify the benefits that are charged, but we do not approve those rates. So those are some of the things we do. We are a staff of 26. I've kind of talked about some of these. 27 actually here coming. We have one approved position for the pharmacy benefit manager position that we're currently recruiting for. Again, that is the smallest insurance department in the nation. Everybody else has a little bit more than we do, but we're getting there. Some of the things that we do regulate that you may not associate with the insurance department is prearranged funeral contracts. Those go through us. Don't ask me what, how, or why, but those do. Service contracts for your home and vehicles, privately owned cemetery trusts also go through us. Air ambulance membership organizations, which we had a bill a few years ago regarding that. Motor club organizations as well. And we do a lot of different things, but really the end goal is to just help consumers and to educate consumers. That's our purpose, and we hope that it helps all of you and the constituents, your constituents. But I'll stand for any questions. I hope that wasn't too bad.
Yeah, actually, that was fabulous. So let's hear from the committee. Senator Scott.
And for the benefits of some of our newer members, how the two guarantee associations work.
Yes.
Please, Deputy
Mr.
Commissioner.
Senator Scott, actually, that is where Commissioner Root is today. He is at the Life and Health Guarantee Association meeting in Sheridan. So we have two guarantee associations, and the purpose of the guarantee associations are to protect Wyoming residents from insurance companies who go insolvent. If insurance companies, in the event that it doesn't have to be a Wyoming domestic insurance company either. It can be any insurance company that has business within our state. If it goes insolvent, which there is an entire process for insolvency that the insurance company, the insurance department takes over and maintains these insurance companies and regulates its business and as it goes insolvent. But the Guarantee Association is there to give Wyoming consumers some protection. So there are limits, and I'm sorry, Senator Scott, I do not know the limits off the top of my head. I can definitely get those to you, but for every type of insurance, life, annuity, property, casualty, health, there are benefits to Wyoming consumers if those insurance companies do go insolvent. So meaning Wyoming consumers will never be left without if an insurance company goes insolvent.
Senator Scott,
Mr. Chairman,
is your mic on?
I would
Okay, thank you.
comment on the guarantee associations. They don't cover surplus lines. You need to understand that. They are a very real protection for somebody who buys insurance that is properly admitted in the state. And there is a prohibition on the company's advertising that they're covered by the Guarantee Association. And I think that's a legislative matter. Frankly, I think we ought to repeal it and allow the companies to say that they are covered by the Guarantee Association. The NAIC has done a marvelous job across the country on making sure insurance companies are financially regulated, and they need that because there's a long gap, depending on the kind of insurance, between when you pay and when you collect on your insurance. And in the absence of financial regulation, the opportunity for fraud is very clear. And during the 2007, 2008, 2009 financial crisis, it was noticeable that none of the regulated insurance companies I can recollect
Right.
went bankrupt because of that, went out of business. Some of their holding companies that were federally regulated did, but the actual insurance companies did not. The NAIC has done a first-rate job. They've had some problems, particularly in the long-term care area, where falling interest rates destroyed a good part of the revenue. And they really had struggled with getting that one right. But it has been quite successful. And I think that's worth understanding. So, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make those points pretty clear because they are important parts of it. When Obamacare bankrupted one of our health insurance companies, the Win Health, almost all the policyholders were made good. They don't cover quite everything. I think you had to pay a percentage. And there was at least one set of claims that went over the limits. But it really was quite successful. And the other one I'm aware of we had to pay off was when a Pennsylvania long-term care insurance company went broke.
Yep.
And we had to pay off for Wyoming policy holders that were covered by that company, as did all the other guarantee associations all across the country.
Mhm.
So it's an important feature, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Ms. Howard, anything more? And Mr. Stevens, were you going to say anything? Are we good?
I think we're good.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I wasn't cutting off Mr. Stevens. So with leave, a couple of things in perspective here. We are the smallest state in the country with the number of consumers with respect to insurance. We have the smallest insurance commission. It's a very difficult market. It's really tough. And it's tough. I think it's very tough in the health insurance field. You've all heard about that. It's tough in the casualty area. I mentioned that we don't do a lot of surplus lines. For the first time in my life, I've had to go to surplus lines for casualty insurance on a normal business that for many years. So markets actually seem to be stretched, I guess, for lack of a better thing. We don't rate regulate. That was covered very clearly. If we probably were a rate regulation company or a state, we probably have even less people offering insurance in the company. But the reason we have this organization that tries to keep state regulation very consistent across the country is really to try to preempt our friends at the federal government. At one time, there was a movement, and it's come back at a couple of different times, but it was, I remember even in the 80s, it came back, right? Was that about the right time? To have insurance be federally regulated and cut the, basically cut the regulation of insurance out of the states. I hope we don't do that because I'm very impressed with the response we get from having our state insurance agency. I have had many constituent issues that I've been able to ask the Department for Insurance for assistance on. They've really been wonderful to comply and to assist my consumers. I personally use them. There's one lady, no relation of mine, but her name is Ruth Case. She's kind of my go-to person when I have an insurance question in the consumer field, and she's fabulous. And she's helped me personally, as well as, you may not realize this, but our state employee plan has, it's a self-funded plan administered by the Department of A&I. They don't come under the Department of Insurance. And the Department of A&I is always very prickly about it, but frequently the Department of Insurance has helped me to assist and point in the right direction. Someone that's on the state plan that needs, that's being treated unfairly, and they brought it to my attention. And the truth is, and in the past, we've talked about giving more jurisdiction to the Department of Insurance over the state plan. I would just say that might be a good thing, because I think employees, you all up there, more than I do about how difficult it can be on the state administered plan. That's all. I do just want to give kudos to this department and look forward to your continued work. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it is important to understand that the federal government has prohibited the states from regulating large employer self-insured plans. And that cuts them out of a major part of the health insurance business. The only exception to that is where it's a state agency and we can tell the state agency what to do.
Yeah.
But those plans are fairly common, and we federally are preempted from having any authority over those. Mr. Chairman, I do want to ask one question. We're obviously licensing a tremendous number of out-of-state agents, adjusters, et cetera. Why do we get so many of them that want to be licensed in Wyoming? It's obviously profitable for us. Why do they want to do that? Never understood that.
Deputy Commissioner. Or, I'm sorry, yeah, go ahead, Mr.
Chairman.
Stevens, please.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, Brian Stevens, I am, market conduct examiner, consumer affairs manager, and until recently, the producer licensing supervisor. We have so many out of states because on the adjusting side and on the producer side, you get these major call centers. There are some national insurers where you call up to say, add a new truck to your policy. Those people have to be licensed that take that call. So typically these large call centers will license them in all 50 states. Same with the adjusters. When you call in a hail claim on your house, you're going to get an adjuster, somewhere in a call center in another states. They have to be licensed before they can talk to you about it at all. So that's the reason we have so many licensees.
Apparently it's a good business. It's probably even cleaner and better than LLCs, you guys. Right. Senator Scott.
Would mention one final thing. It was 1983 when we deregulated property and casualty insurance rates. And that did cause the rates to go down. Obviously been overtaken by inflation since. But it was quite clear that after that experience, that the rate regulation was causing the rates to stay higher.
Anybody else on insurance? Yeah, Representative Yen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Deputy Director. So you probably didn't prepare for this question, but I'm going to pose it anyways. Is it possible for you to just high-level overview what the oversight in Senate File 151 that you're going to be implementing in July is going to look like?
Deputy Commissioner,
Mr. Chairman.
give us some background on what 151 is. I can't do numbers within 2 days of the session usually, so.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin. Yes, so Senate File 151 is adding more regulation to pharmacy benefit managers, which we currently require licensure and have law on the books regarding audits and some minimal things. 151 is adding some, it is beefing up some of that. So right now we're in the process. You know, we've gone through the bill with 151, obviously, and right now we're in the meat of trying to get somebody hired with this pharmacy benefit manager position. In 151, as you may or may not be aware, we were allotted $125,000 to hire on a pharmacy benefit manager, program manager. And that person is really going to be responsible for taking on and kind of the bull with the horns, creating our pharmacy benefit manager program and all aspects of that. We have been in the process of talking with several different states regarding education and training, because that's with our 26 employees. I think we've kind of, if I haven't, beat it up enough, we got a lot of work. So pharmacy benefit managers haven't been something that we've really dove into, and we've only received to date we've gotten a few in the past. So we have about 7 complaints total since the 2016 legislation went in place. So it's not something that we've taken a lot of time and funding to learn a lot more about, because we just haven't had the push. But 151 is now that we have a designated person with 150 with the Senate File 151. We're looking forward to having more education and starting out this program. We've talked to a lot of different states about how to implement this program and how, what we need to do. We're working on different forms for the pharmacists and for the uniform complaint process for our independent pharmacists. We're also working on some templates of formal communication to send to the pharmacy benefit managers when we do receive a complaint. We're in the beginning infancy stages without getting, it's been a little bit of an administrative burden, just dealing with the Department of A&I, and that's not to their fault. Just getting, it's state government. It takes a little bit of work to get a position classified and get the money into the budget loaded, and then decide. And now we're currently, the state of Wyoming is in a hiring freeze until July 1. So we're currently trying to advertise for this position and get this going, but it's not off the grounds yet. So I apologize if I don't have more, but we're in the beginning stages. We look forward to it once we get that person in place and getting that training in place and that formal process. Those are our first steps here in the next 120 days.
Senator Scott or Senator Representative Yin, good. Great. Anything else for the department? Thanks you guys for making the trip to Lander, and drive safely home.
Thank you for having us.
Stick around in case there's comments. We're going to see if there are any comments in the room. Any comments in the room with respect to this topic? Katie, do we have any comments online? Are there any, then we'll kind of close the insurance department. Are there any general public comments that people would like to make, or anything online? Any general public comments? Not seeing any in the room, or is there anything online? Okay, we did it. Done it. So thank you very much. Is there, I yield to the co-chairman, see how we can wrap this up.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. I think maybe what we'll do, if you don't mind, is we'll have LSO just read back to us over the course of the last 2 days, what actions, what bills we're moving forward, what memos we asked for, research, basically the tasks we assigned you, and we'll make sure we got it all.
Sure thing, Josh Anderson, LSO. So I think we had 8 different elections bills. We had the 4 bills requested by the Secretary of State. Those were on voter residency, school district trustee issue, private funding of elections, and then fixes for the voter crossover bill. Then the other four bills, we had Senate Joint Resolution 6, which was the one presented by Representative Chestic. We had the campaign reporting issue that was discussed by Chairman Case. We had the residency requirements for candidates. And then we had the other changes that were suggested to House Bill 103, which is also the voter crossover, the voting crossover bill. So those two could likely be combined in some way. Then the other two bills we had in regulatory reform, we're going to look at a bill based on the 2023 House Bill 214 as suggested by the governor's office. And then on the special districts, we have the bill requested by the Secretary of State's office on appointing of or extending the terms of appointed members. Then we had a white paper on looking at what other states do on poll watchers. And then we had direction to, of course, bring back on special districts that issue of funding or the loan and allowing special districts potentially to get some loans or grants that wouldn't require election of the district members. That was what I had, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if I missed anything. Please let me know.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. With your permission, would like to ask Josh if you and the troops could take a look at with the residency consideration, at least provide a staff note on if the committee had any interest in moving to a year out from the primary election. Realizing that it's probably constitutionally established that that would be the general election for the 1 year residency requirement. But if you might at least take a look at that angle as to whether or not we would want to consider, or if we even could consider asking that somebody be a resident for a year before they could be nominated in a primary election. For the legislature, yes. That was pretty central to an issue we had in our county, and I'm just curious whether or not that might even be doable, let alone whether the committee would have an interest in even taking it up. But it would at least be informative to us. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else, committee?
One more.
One more. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would just ask that the two chairmen consider, I want to go back to the Office of the Consumer Advocate situation. There was a good memo provided to us encouraging support of some things. I would just ask that the chairman review that. I think there might be some room for us to forward a consideration, at least to the Appropriations Committee on behalf of that office. They're asking for another position. They also suggested that perhaps the University of Wyoming might be willing to take up a curriculum that would benefit that kind of preparation. Another consideration or two that I thought might be worth taking a look at by the chairman for a communication on up to the Management Council or to the Appropriations Committee.
Senator Scott.
Chairman, I hope that the two chairmen in planning future work in the committee will continue to have a major focus on the electricity area. It seems to me that we're facing some extraordinary challenges at this time. Issues of reclamation costs, how big they are, who are going to pay for them. I think that might well be something we ought to legislate on. And I can offline make suggestions to the chairman of some of the things I think we ought to look at in that area. The issues of, are we getting the grid unreliable with too many large scale renewable things that we're approving in both this state and where we're approving them in other states? Are we getting ourselves in trouble there? And it does look like if we don't intervene in some way in some of those issues, we're going to see both unreliability and, looking at that chart of planned investments, I think we're going to see major rate increases if we aren't active. So I thought the sessions this morning were very useful in terms of raising some of the issues, and I think we need to think pretty hard about following up with that legislation and see if the timing is right now, or whether it's a general session issue. But I think there's some things that with considerable immediacy in there. So just, that's not so much wanting instructions to LSO at this point, but wanting the chairman to think about laying out an agenda for us in that area.
Our thinking so far has been that we are going to continue this effort, probably at every meeting, have something on electricity for the two interims. Certainly. Welcome your suggestions as what we should cover at the next one. But it's a very big topic. You guys were very, very patient. And I would plan to continue that because it is just our Wyoming future in a nutshell, really, the transition. If that's good enough, Senator Scott, Mr. Chairman, I got one more. Go ahead. I think it was extraordinary yesterday, the clerks and their presentation on elections. I don't think we even really realized how great that presentation was, but very extraordinarily is it, there was no backlash from people that previously had talked about our elections being fraudulent or having irregularities or being outright, people that had advocated about rampant fraud at Wyoming elections. They had their chance yesterday to comment on the integrity that the clerks presented to us. And it is significant that no one spoke up. No, not a soul, either online or there were people in this room too. And I think maybe we've turned the corner on that issue. So I'm very grateful to the committee and especially grateful to the clerks and Secretary of State's office for helping us to get to this point. I think it's a big, important point. So I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Chairman, I would suggest the committee ask the chairman to send the clerks via their association or individually a letter thanking them for the quality of that presentation and for the quality of the work they've done in ensuring the integrity of our elections. And while you're at it, compliment the Secretary of State too, because he did a responsible job on that area.
Sure. Anything else? Sure. All right. Move to adjourn. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank
We
you,
will
everybody.
adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Travels home, thanks to all the agencies and all the local folks that helped and all of you traveling. Thank you.
Thanks,
See ya.
guys.